PPTs, parents, families, and you. How to make the journey to an IEP or a 504 plan a smooth one. So what is your experience with PPTs? Are you a special ed teacher? Are you a general education teacher? Are you a school counselor, school psychologist, or social worker? A parent, an advocate, a student? From each of those perspectives, a PPT meeting, a pupil planning team meeting, may seem very different. When you're sitting in the role as the special education teacher, you take on a certain feeling of particular responsibility. When you are the parent of a child with an exceptionality, you may feel differently about sitting at that table, even though you may have sat at very similar tables as a professional. If you've ever had the opportunity to be the student who was sitting in your own PPT meeting, you may have had a completely different experience. So from all of those perspectives, we need to keep in mind that this PPT or Section 504 planning meeting needs to meet the needs of all of the folks, and that everybody who's there needs to feel like they are a member of that team and that they are welcome and respected. So really our ultimate goal when we are sitting in these meetings is to make sure that the families or parents feel comfortable, respected, and absolutely without any question that they feel heard. Even when they tell you things that are out of sync with perhaps with who their child is or where their child might ultimately end up, it's really important that we listen to them and that we respect what it is that they're saying. The school personnel need to make sure that they really feel that they've provided a strong educational program. And I think many school personnel feel that other individuals don't respect what it is that they've done, and that they've worked really hard to put together a really good plan for a student, and that perhaps there's other individuals at the table who may think that that's not necessarily the case. Students need to feel supported, and ultimately, above and beyond all of the other things that we'll talk about, is that that particular child or youth's needs to be met. That's really our ultimate goal for why we are there, which oftentimes we need to get our own selves and our own feelings and our own personalities and expectations out of the picture to make sure that that student's needs are met. So as you're preparing for a meeting as the administrator, it's really important to make sure that you know enough about this particular student. So you should look over the student's file a few days before a PPT or a 504 meeting. After a period of time, there may be students that you don't need to go back to their file because you know them and you know what's going on with them. But most especially when you don't know the students, you need to make sure that you have enough information to go into that meeting. Make sure that you have all the materials that you need ready for the meeting. Have an agenda. You want to make sure that you have an agenda. An agenda is a good way to not let a meeting get derailed. Check with others to make sure they're ready, that they have the appropriate coverage that they need, that they have any copies that they may need to bring to the meeting, that they know what their role is. Some things that you want to make sure that you do is arrive to the meeting on time. I think one of the things that oftentimes signals families that people don't care about their child is when people don't come on time. And especially when the administrator in charge is not showing up on time or is not staying for the whole meeting. The expectation is that you stay there unless there is an extreme emergency. So you need to make sure that your schedule is clear so that you can stay put. You want to be empathetic. You want to make sure that you're listening to what it is that the team is saying. What should you do? You want to make sure that no one is suggesting that a child be tested unless the school district is really willing to pay for it. So there may be tests and evaluations that would be interesting additions to a student's file. There may be things that your team thinks would be helpful, but if they are not necessary, you need to make sure that the team is not going down that rabbit hole in that direction. You want to make sure that you don't make any promises that you can't keep. When you find yourself in situations where it appears that a child maybe needs more evaluation or there's a promise that someone is asking you to make and you don't feel comfortable doing it at that time, I would say, I'm going to check into this and I will get back to you. So then you have not put yourself or the district in a place that you have opened them up for expectations that may or may not be possible. If you know that you have an extremely difficult situation, you may want to invite the central office staff to come to those meetings. Keep in mind a few things. If the parents bring a lawyer, you don't want to hold that meeting unless the school district lawyer is present. So if the parents show up with a lawyer that you were not expecting, what you want to say to them is, sorry, we appreciate that you have come at this time. However, since you have brought in your lawyer, we need to make sure that ours can be with us as well. So we are going to need to reconvene this meeting. We will be in touch with another date. Do not agree to anything that's not in the best interest of the child. Sometimes folks on the team have lots of ideas about things that would be interesting or maybe a possibility, but they may or may not really be in the best interest of the student that you're looking at. So you want to make sure that you're not agreeing to ideas that individuals have that are not appropriate for that child. You want to try really hard not to get sucked into family dynamics. This can be very challenging. Sometimes you'll find yourself in meetings where the parents have had a very contentious divorce. Some of them will tell you, well, I'm not going to be in the room if he's in the room, or I won't come if she's there. They may try to get you to hold multiple meetings. You absolutely do not want to do that. If they are unwilling to be in the room together, then I would offer the opportunity that one of them is on a conference call. But you do not want to start running multiple PPT meetings, because it's very easy to say one thing in one meeting with one parent and then have somebody say something slightly different in the meeting with the other parent, and then you have a problem. The other thing that you certainly want to keep in mind is cost. The ultimate goal of a public school education is to make sure that a student is getting the very best education possible. We want students to live up to their very best possibilities. However, we are not necessarily in the business of providing them with the most extensive education. So if they could be at the Holiday Inn, you're not offering them Club Med. So you don't want to be offering services and other things that are really not necessary for that child to excel. Of course, you want to make sure that that child is living up to their very best potential. So you have to keep that balance. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, and there's probably nothing that annoys teachers, parents, and probably almost everyone on a team more than meetings that are not going in the timeline that they were expected. So you want to be careful about how you schedule meetings. If you know that you have a particular family that is going to take a little bit more time, then you want to make sure that you schedule them towards the end of the day. You don't want to be on everybody has a half an hour schedule and have a family who needs 45 minutes or perhaps even an hour holding up the other family who should be in the next meeting. Many times folks have taken time off from work, so you want to make sure that you don't leave families waiting. A few other things to keep in mind. You want to be genuine when you welcome the parent or family to the meeting. Even when it's been a really difficult situation, you need to put your best, professional face on, put a good smile on your face, and make them feel that they are welcome at that meeting. More often than not, once you break down that barrier and you have that parent or family feeling like they're a respected and welcome member of a team, a lot of times all the things that were contentious will fall away. There are some families that will still hold on to some problems. There will still be issues no matter what. But many of them, the reason that they kind of are ready to fight is because that's what they've been doing for so long. And when you set the stage so they don't have to, you find that you have a completely different relationship with them. You want to provide name tags so they know who's there. One of my colleagues has suggested that you make name tags for all the staff in your building. You keep them in the room that you typically run your PPTs, and then you have tags that are available for the family. The kind of, the little triangle things that you set up on the table can be nice. Then they know who's there. When you're the parent or family member sitting at a meeting, more often than not, there's a lot more professionals in the room than there are folks that are representing the child from the family side. So it can be very overwhelming to have all those people in the room, and oftentimes they can't remember who all those people are, what their role is, what their name is. Remember that parents are often difficult, as I kind of said earlier, because they're scared, sad. They may feel helpless. They may have a very difficult child, and they're struggling at home, and folks at the meeting are going, well, your child is really giving us a really hard time at school. And they're thinking, oh, wow, we're having a really, really hard time at home, and I don't have nearly as many resources at home as you do here. So they may feel really like people don't recognize how challenging the situation is for them, and they may be feeling very, very helpless. They could potentially be mourning what could have been. You will see that sometimes as students are at points of transition, as you have students who are moving from preschool to kindergarten, students moving from elementary school to middle school to high school. You may see parents mourning because their child is not necessarily going to do some of the same things that other children their age are doing. We need to recognize that that can be a very stressful time, and they need time to process that. Their child may not be getting a driver's license. Child may not be going off to college. Those are all things that I think parents are hoping for and wishing for when they have a child. They were not anticipating that they were going down a different road. Other things that are helpful to have for families are a list of local resources. So having a printed list that you can hand them of other resources that they could access in the community are very helpful. This is where you could get a bigger car seat for your child. This is where you could get some other things that you need for your home. This is how you can get someone to help you build a ramp at your house. Those are all things that sometimes they get overwhelmed trying to figure out. So if you have a list of local resources that you can just hand to them, that can be incredibly helpful. If the meeting starts getting out of control and the parent starts getting verbally or perhaps even physically abusive, you want to take a short break or set another time to reconvene the meeting. Sometimes just taking 5 is enough for folks to go, oops, it's going in a way that we didn't really want to go. I'm losing my temper. I know I really shouldn't be yelling at these folks at my kid's school. Or it could be that you just really need to totally walk away and set another meeting time. One of the challenges that I think we have when parents bring an advocate to the table is that many times the advocate has ideas about how they think this particular student's educational plan should be put together. Sometimes they are exactly on target and everything that they're saying makes complete sense for that child. Other times they seem to have an agenda, perhaps of their own, that may or may not line up with that particular family, and it may or may not necessarily line up with that particular student. One of the things that you want to make sure does not happen is that the advocate starts speaking for the family. You want to make sure that if the advocate is offering suggestions or ideas, that it is clear that that family member who is responsible for being the representation for the student is also in line with what it is that they're saying. Again, I think I did this twice. Apparently it's important. If the family brings a lawyer and the district lawyer is not present, you want to reschedule. So one kind of final thought about meetings is always do what's in the best interest of the child. I think sometimes that can be challenging for us. Sometimes that child needs more services than we think that we could possibly provide. Sometimes that child's best interests are not necessarily what all of the team is agreeing upon, and it's your responsibility as the person who is leading this meeting, as the administrator of record, to really try to make sure that everyone refocuses back to what is the best interest of the child. An example of this I will offer you. I've had situations where families have wanted, say, their what would be a senior in high school age child to take a physics class, when in all reality it would be better if that particular child were going to a job site and learning some skills. But the family is really into the idea of, well, this, I want my child included in general education classrooms. This is the sign that my child is being accepted by the community, et cetera, et cetera. And that may be time that is not necessarily well spent. So helping that family understand that their child who has significant cognitive disabilities may or may not be benefiting from a physics class, but who could benefit enormously from some job training skills. So giving them other options and helping them see other opportunities might be very helpful, and you will be the person who may be trying to lead them in a direction that really is in the best interest of the child. Now, if that child were somebody who was going to benefit from being in that physics class, whether it was because they enjoyed the material or the teacher was just really awesome at getting kids connected to other people, then you might want them to be in that physics class. So you want to think about what's in the best interest of that particular child.